This is the 5-minute guide to the Nevada-class battleships of the United States Navy. The Nevada-class were the first American battleships of the standard pattern. The standard pattern was designed so that multiple classes of battleship would share certain broad characteristics which would make it easier to coordinate them in a single line of battle. This included using guns of the same caliber, having the same speed, and being designed for the same kind of engagement. This was to avoid the existing issues with the American battle fleet, where their current small collection of dreadnought battleships had radically different armament, protection, and speed on a class-by-class basis. Since they did not have enough battleships of any single class to put them into individual battle squadrons which could then be treated as single units, they needed to work together across multiple classes. Otherwise you might leave someone behind, and they would miss the battle, which would make them sad. The Nevada class comprised a pair of ships, the USS Nevada and the USS Oklahoma. The previous New York class had carried 10 14-inch guns in 5 twin turrets, but this had met with a lot of disapproval from United States Navy captains, mainly because it meant magazines everywhere, including in the middle of the engine spaces, with the resulting potential for a critical hit in almost any location on the ship. The need to protect so many individual magazines also reduced the weight available for other aspects of the ship's working. Conversely, they also worried that putting many guns in a single turret might mean the loss of most of the main battery to a couple of lucky hits. Since new ships should not have less firepower than the old ships, a compromise was reached for the ship to retain 10 14-inch guns, but now in only 4 turrets, a twin super firing over a triple forward, and the same at the rear. The secondary battery of 21 5-inch guns was kept in casemate mountings in the hull, although a number of American captains warned against this as the designs used had changed little since the pre-Dreadnought era. As it turned out, half the guns ended up taking on water most of the time, and by 1918 those at the far ends had been removed, leaving only 12 guns in the center of the ship, much to the relief of the rather damp crew assigned to those positions. A pair of 3-inch anti-aircraft guns and a pair of torpedo tubes completed the armament. The Nevada carried steam turbines whilst the Oklahoma carried the old triple expansion engines. Both ships were capable of the standard design speed of 21 knots, although Nevada could keep the speed up for longer and was a smoother ride at these speeds. The other major item was the use of the so-called all-or-nothing armor scheme. This was a departure from the existing method of protecting battleships, and was designed to allow greater protection over the vital areas. There is a separate video discussing this that accompanies this upload. It is claimed that these ships were designed for long-range combat, and so were ahead of their time. However, there is some reason to doubt this claim, or at least to doubt that the design was effective in this regard. I will list my reservations about the idea here. 1. The cage mast. Many American ships of this era were fitted with a lattice cage mast, which we have discussed in previous videos, but in short, this kind of mast was singularly unsuited to providing useful targeting and range information at long range, especially at any kind of appreciable speed. 2. The guns. The guns were only designed with 15 degrees of elevation, a figure closer to German than British practice, which meant their absolute maximum range was limited to 21,000 yards, and they used a high-velocity low-weight shell that had significant accuracy issues at longer ranges. 3. The armor. Whilst the protection of the ships was increased compared to the previous classes, as you can see from the accompanying table, contemporary ships carried similar levels of belt and deck armor protection. 4. Armor penetration. The shells fired from the ship's guns had little chance of penetrating the belt armor of contemporary battleships at ranges much greater than 12 to 14,000 yards, and the angle of fall was not steep enough to make deck hits likely to be useful. Overall, whilst they represent a significant upgrade over the New Yorks, I believe they are more accurately described as designed for longer range combat than the United States Navy had previously planned for, as opposed to combat well in excess of the ranges that the most advanced navies at the time were planning for, since at a number of battles the British ships specifically tried to exploit the greater range advantage they had over the Germans, opening fire comfortably at ranges that were approximately the same as the maximum possible range on the Nevada's guns. Both ships served in the Atlantic Fleet on escort duty in the First World War, and were heavily modernized in the late 1920s, receiving new tripod masts, aircraft catapults, improved guns and mountings for greater range and accuracy, a redesigned secondary battery with a lot more anti-aircraft guns in exchange for the removal of the torpedo tubes, and the other secondary guns moved upper deck to keep them drier. At Pearl Harbor, the Oklahoma was hit by 5 torpedoes and capsized as a total loss, second only to the destruction of the Arizona. Nevada on the other hand took only moderate damage and beached herself to prevent possible sinking. The ship was then salvaged and completely refitted with all weapons below the main battery removed and replaced with 8 twin 5-inch turrets, 8 quadruple 40mm cannon and 40 single 20mm cannon. With this complete, she spent 1943 escorting convoys, and then moved on to shore bombardment in 1944, supporting the D-Day landings and subsequent operations in France, including fighting a duel with a major shore battery in Toulon. In 1945 she relocated to the Pacific, and supported the landings at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. She was then used in 1948 as a target in atomic bomb testing, but survived this despite heavy damage and becoming very radioactive. She was then used as a target by the Iowa and a pair of other warships, but still refused to sink. Eventually the stubborn old ship had to be sunk by an airdrop torpedo. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.